1938. A pair of Jewish writers named Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster are publishing their creation in Action Comics 1. A man who can't be hurt, a man who can't be stopped, a man so far beyond ordinary human beings that the laws of physics don't apply to him. They called him Superman. They had no idea they were accidentally illustrating the exact nightmare scenario that Friedrich Nietzsche had been warning the Western world about for 50 years. And here's the darkest irony in the history of comic books. Nietzsche's philosophy had just been weaponized by Nazi Germany to justify the most horrific genocide in human history, and two Jewish kids responded by creating the most famous Nietzschean figure in popular culture. They just didn't realize it yet. Neither did we. Because for 80 years we've been watching the wrong story. We thought Superman was the hero. Nietzsche would tell us he's the warning. To understand why, you have to understand what Nietzsche actually believed, not the distorted version the Nazis stole, the real one. In 1883, Nietzsche wrote Thus Spoke Zarathustra, a philosophical novel about a prophet who descends from a mountain to deliver one message to humanity. He wrote that God is dead, not as a celebration, as a diagnosis. He was saying that the Western world had built its entire moral framework on divine authority, and now that framework was collapsing. Without God, without that external moral anchor, humanity had two options. The first option was nihilism. Without God, nothing means anything. No morality, no purpose, no reason to go on. Nietzsche considered this the path of the weak. The second option was the Ubermensch, the overman, the individual who looks into the void of a universe with no inherent meaning and creates his own values, who rises above the herd, above conventional morality, above the rules designed for ordinary people, and becomes something beyond human. Nietzsche didn't think the Ubermensch was coming soon. He thought humanity was still too enslaved by what he called slave morality, the moral system invented by the weak to keep the strong in check. Humility, meekness, turning the other cheek. He thought these were tools of resentment, not genuine virtue. He was waiting for the man who would transcend all of it. Then DC Animation gave that man a red cape. Look at the Superman of the DC animated universe, Superman. The animated series, Justice League Unlimited. This is the definitive Superman, the one an entire generation grew up watching. He is, by every measurable standard, the Nietzschean Ubermensch made flesh. He is physically beyond humanity. No human can hurt him, match him, or stop him. He operates under a completely self-determined moral code that he created himself and answers to no government, no court, no democratic institution. He decides what is right. He decides what is just. He decides when to intervene and when to let events play out, and the entire planet defers to him. That's not a hero. That's Nietzsche's prophet descending from the mountain, and the DC Outriders knew this because they spent years building an entire storyline around the single most important question Nietzsche's philosophy forces us to ask. What happens when the Ubermensch decides ordinary people can't be trusted to run their own world? In Justice League Unlimited, there's a moment that is the most philosophically honest scene in the history of American animation. The Cadmus Arc. The United States government, democratically elected, representing the will of ordinary human beings, looks up at a space station orbiting the Earth where 7 godlike beings watch over the planet, and they ask a question that Nietzsche would have recognized immediately. Who decides what the Overman does with his power? Because here's what the DCAO establishes without flinching. The Justice League has, at various points, the capability to end hunger, stop wars, topple dictatorships, and restructure human civilization. Superman alone could fly into any conflict zone on Earth and resolve it in hours. He doesn't. He makes a choice not to. A unilateral, self-determined choice, based on values he created for himself, about how much intervention is appropriate. That is not democracy. That is not accountability. That is the Ubermensch practicing exactly what Nietzsche described. The creation of personal values that supersede the moral consensus of the herd. And for most of the series, we cheer for it, because Nietzsche understood something uncomfortable about human psychology. We want the Overman. We want someone beyond ordinary limitations to take responsibility for the chaos we can't manage ourselves. Slave morality resents the strong, but it also desperately needs them. But here's where Nietzsche's warning kicks in, and this is the part nobody talks about. Nietzsche didn't just describe the Ubermensch as an ideal, he described it as a danger. He wrote extensively about what he called the will to power, the fundamental drive in all living things to expand, to overcome, to impose their vision on the world. In an ordinary person, this drive is checked by limitation. You can't impose your vision on 7 billion people if you're 7 billion people too. But what if you're not? What if you can hear every cry for help on the planet simultaneously? What if you've watched humanity make the same catastrophic mistakes for decades while possessing the power to stop every single one of them? Nietzsche understood that the Ubermensch's greatest enemy isn't the villain. It's the moment the Ubermensch stops believing the herd deserves to choose its own fate. The DAO shows us this moment. It's called the Justice Lords. In the Justice League episode A Better World, Superman crosses the line that Nietzsche warned about. The premise is simple. In a parallel universe, President Lex Luthor provokes the Flash into attacking him and murders him in retaliation. The Justice League of that universe watches their youngest, most innocent member die at the hands of a corrupt politician protected by democratic institutions. And Superman makes a decision. He flies to the Oval Office, he kills Lex Luthor, and then, with the rest of the Justice Lords, he proceeds to fix the world, lobotomizing supervillains, enforcing peace through absolute power, creating a civilization where war, crime, and suffering have been dramatically reduced. By every utilitarian measure, it works. The world is objectively safer, and it is the most terrifying thing the DCAO ever put on screen, because Nietzsche predicted it perfectly. He wrote that the will to power, when unchecked by genuine philosophical discipline, doesn't stop at justice. It becomes what he called nihilism of the strong, the imposition of one being's values on everyone else, under the justification that the strong know better. The Justice Lords didn't become villains because they were evil. They became villains because they were right about Luthor, and then made the catastrophic Nietzschean error of deciding that being right once meant they were qualified to be right about everything forever. Superman didn't become a tyrant because he wanted power. He became a tyrant because he stopped believing ordinary people were capable of managing themselves without him. That's not corruption. That's the Ubermensch philosophy taken to its logical conclusion. Now look at the Superman of our universe, the DCAO Prime Superman, and understand what makes him genuinely heroic in Nietzschean terms. It's not his power, it's his restraint. Nietzsche's most misunderstood concept is what he called amor fati, love of fate. The idea that the truly powerful individual doesn't just tolerate the chaos and suffering of existence, but embraces it, chooses it. The Ubermensch doesn't resent that the world is broken. The Ubermensch loves the world precisely because it requires everything he has. Superman, in his best moments, practices this. He holds back constantly. In almost every episode, he is operating at a fraction of his capacity, absorbing punishment he could end in seconds, allowing human institutions to function even when he could replace them instantly. That restraint is not weakness. In Nietzschean terms, it is the highest possible expression of will to power, choosing limitation when you could choose omnipotence. It is the Ubermensch who understands that the point was never to rule the herd, but to inspire it to rise. This is what separates Prime Superman from the Justice Lord Superman. Not morality in the conventional sense, not the rules handed down by human institutions he could ignore entirely, but a self-created philosophical discipline that says, I have the power to end human agency, therefore I must never use it. That's not the morality of the weak. That's the most demanding standard Nietzsche ever described. But here's the dark irony that the DCAO keeps returning to, and that Nietzsche would find completely inevitable. It doesn't work. Not really. Not permanently. Because the problem with the Ubermensch model isn't Superman, it's us, it's the herd. Nietzsche wrote that slave morality doesn't just resent the strong out of jealousy. It resents the strong because the existence of the overman is an implicit accusation. Every time Superman saves a city that humanity's own institutions failed to protect, he is demonstrating, without saying a word, that the ordinary human project is insufficient. That left to ourselves, we build the conditions for our own destruction and need a god from another planet to clean it up. That's why Luthor hates Superman. Not because Superman has done anything wrong, but because Superman's existence is proof of human inadequacy. And Luthor, who has spent his entire life constructing an identity around human exceptionalism, cannot survive in a world where the ceiling of human achievement is still infinitely beneath the baseline of a Kryptonian farm boy. The DCAO understands this. Luthor's entire motivation is philosophical before it's personal. He tells Superman directly, your existence makes humanity weaker, because as long as you're here, we'll never have to become strong ourselves. Nietzsche would say Luthor is half right. The Ubermensch was never supposed to save the herd. He was supposed to make the herd obsolete by inspiring it to produce its own Ubermenschen. The tragedy of the DCAO Superman isn't that he's too powerful, it's that he's so powerful and so genuinely good that he removes the necessity of the struggle that Nietzsche considered the only thing that produces greatness. He doesn't create a world of supermen. He creates a world of people waiting to be saved. And this is Nietzsche's final warning, the one that the cape and the symbol and the John Williams theme have been drowning out for 80 years. The Ubermensch isn't the answer to the human problem. He's the most seductive form of the human problem. Because the moment you believe that one being, however good, however restrained, however genuinely committed to human flourishing, the moment you believe that one being's values should anchor the moral universe of an entire civilization, you have abandoned the project of becoming. You have traded the difficult, painful, beautiful chaos of self-determination for the comfort of a God who means well. Nietzsche didn't fear the evil Superman. He feared the good one, the one whose virtue is so obvious and whose power is so absolute that we voluntarily stop asking whether we should be doing this ourselves. The DC animated universe gave us the most honest version of this story ever told in American popular culture. They showed us the Justice Lords. They showed us the Cadmus Project. They showed us a Superman who battles every single day with the knowledge that the kindest thing he could do for humanity might be to leave. And then they kept him here because we need him. Because the world he inhabits is too broken to survive without him. Nietzsche wrote that God is dead. The DCAO's quiet, devastating response is, yes. So we built a new one, and now we can't figure out how to live without him either. Superman isn't the hero Nietzsche warned us about. He's the answer Nietzsche warned us we'd settle for.